Good morning, students. We have to start from then came Npongo's first real illness. Yesterday, we came to know that there were some black boxes installed in different parts of the zoo so that the narrator could be intimated of any emergency if there is some problem with the animal, with any of the animals in the zoo. So the narrator can be intimated about it and some action could be taken without any loss of time. So for this reason, these black boxes, they were installed. And then the narrator told us about one incident which happened with the black box, right? When he had some guests who were not very well known to him, right? Whom he didn't know very well. They came, then all of a sudden there was a strange noise from that black box, which was installed in that particular room where they were having a meeting. And in the middle of the meeting, the black box gave a warning crackle sound and then said that the gorillas have got diarrhea. So this was one incident which spoiled their, or which it was very embarrassing for the narrator at that time. It was very embarrassing for the writer at that time. So then he said that however, Npongo and Nendi grew apace and to our relief developed none of the diseases that we feared they might contract. So they were very cautious that the animals should not contract any of the diseases, right, which may harm them, right? But this didn't happen. Then came Npongo's first real illness, and when the narrator was happy that the animals, they are growing properly and they didn't contract any of the diseases, what happened? One fine day, Npongo fell seriously ill. I had just arranged to spend 3 weeks in the south of France. It was to be a sort of a working holiday. So he had made plans, the narrator had made plans to go to France, which was like a working holiday. Means he had work and he will enjoy also. So that is a working holiday. For we were to be accompanied by a BBC producer whom I hoped to convince of the necessity of making a film about the life in Cameroon, right? Hotels had been booked. So all these arrangements were done. The time when Npongo fell ill, all these arrangements, his plans were all made to go to France, right? And the things were arranged and everything was settled. Hotels had been booked, number of people ranging from bullfighters to ornithologist. Who is an ornithologist? Ornithologist is a person who studies birds, right? So that person is known as an ornithologist. So ornithologists were arranged, right? So a number of people were involved in this activity, right? They were making a show, making a film, right? So BBC producer, from BBC producer to a number of people involving bullfighters or ornithologists had been alerted of our coming, and everything seemed to be running smoothly. So his plans related to the film which he was about planning to make with the BBC producer, everything related to that film was settled. And all of a sudden, what happened? Npongo fell ill. Then 4 days before we were due to depart, Npongo started to look off color, right? So started to look off color means he became ill, means the color, the glow of his face started vanishing, right? So he was off color. Gone was his giggling exuberance. So what was gone? His giggling exuberance. Or he was always happy. He was the kind of a monkey who was always happy, right? He enjoyed, right? So, but that giggling exuberance, that excitement, that excessive happiness, which was a part of Npongo, that vanished, right? So see, when we are sick or when anyone is sick, he doesn't laugh, he doesn't seem to be happy, he appears to be sad. So this happened to Npongo also, right? So all he has told us several instances when he was very happy, right? He was a very naughty, very active and very happy kind of a monkey. But that thing vanished. His giggling exuberance, his excessive happiness, which was always there, right? That vanished. He lay on the floor or on the shelf, his arms wrapped around himself, staring into space and taking only enough food and milk to keep himself alive, right? So his diet also was reduced, it came down. So he started taking only food and milk, which helped him to be alive. So he lost interest in food also, and he used to keep on lying. The only symptom was acute diarrhea. So the only symptom which the people there and the doctors, they noticed that was of acute diarrhea. He was not able to digest anything. Tests were hurriedly made and the advice of both the vet and the medical profession acted upon. But what he was suffering from remained a mystery. So there were several tests done and reports came, but what was the actual disease with which Npongo was suffering, that still remained a mystery, right? They were not able to detect. As with all apes, he lost weight with horrifying rapidity, right? So with all the people, sorry, as with all apes. So this is something which all happens with apes, right? Because he was not eating properly and then he was suffering from diarrhea. So what happened? He lost weight very quickly. On the second day, he stopped eating altogether and even refused to drink his milk. So on the second day, his condition became more severe. He refused to take milk also. So this meant we could administer no antibiotic. See, you cannot administer antibiotics on an empty stomach, right? So he needs to eat something, but he refused to take milk also. So it meant that no antibiotics could be administered to him. Almost as we watched, his face seemed to shrink and shrivel, and his powerful body grow gaunt. So what happens? Shrivel means wrinkled, right? So his face, it went on becoming smaller and smaller. Shriveling means with a lot of wrinkles becoming smaller. So almost as we watched, his face seemed to shrink and shrivel, and his powerful body grow gaunt. And his powerful, earlier he had a huge body, right? And he was healthy. He was a healthy ape. But what happened? He slowly, because he was not taking any food, right? And he was suffering from diarrhea. So because of this, what happened? He became very gaunt. That is thin. What had once been a proudly rotund paunch now became a ghastly declivity where his ribs forked. So earlier he had a rotund paunch. Paunch means the rounded belly, right? The people who are fat, they had a belly which kind of comes out of the body, the stomach, the round stomach, right, which protrudes from the body. So that is paunch, right? So rotund means fat. So that fat belly which he had became ghastly declivity where his ribs forked. So ghastly declivity means it became a downward slope kind of thing. See, if a person is very fat, has a fat belly, and what happens all of a sudden if he loses weight, what happens? The belly, it hangs, right? It hangs towards the ground. So that kind of a downward slope was formed with his belly. Ghastly means terrible, right? So it became a ghastly declivity where his ribs forked. So the place where his rib, they forked, they divided into two, at that place it became in the form of a downward slope. Now his diarrhea was quite heavily tinged with blood. So now his diarrhea, now blood also started coming out. And at this symptom, I think most of us gave up hope. So this was a very serious condition, right? Whenever he went to the loo, what happened? Blood also, he started discharging blood also. So And this was a serious symptom. So at this stage, right, if a creature reaches this stage, then most of the people, they gave up hope. What hope? The hope of survival. We felt that if he would only eat something, it might at least give him some stamina to withhold whatever disease he was suffering from. He was not eating anything also, right? So he didn't have the stamina, the strength, the energy was also not left inside him to fight the disease. So that is what they hope, that he should at least eat something so that it gives him the stamina and the strength to fight the disease from which he was suffering, as well as rouse him out of the terrible melancholia into which he was slipping. And what else it will do? It will, melancholia means sadness, right? So what else will this do, right? If he develops some kind of interest in food, then he will be, it will also help him to some extent to come out from the terrible sadness into which he was slipping into, as most of the arthropods do when they are ill. Arthropods means the higher mammals, right? Like apes and monkeys, right? So they are the arthropods. Jackie and I went down to the market at Saint Helier and walked among the multicolored stalls that surround the charming Victoria fountain with its plaster cherubim, its palm and maiden-air ferns, and its household chivalry. So what happened? Jackie, along with Jackie, his wife, the narrator went to the market, and then he has given a description of the marketplace. That is, there was a Victoria fountain with its plaster. Cherubim means the angel. There was a structure of an angel, right? Its palms and maiden-air fern. So maiden-air fern is a type of a fern. Ferns are short plants, right, without flowers. And its household chivalry. Okay. So it was difficult to know what to choose for Npongo that would tempt his appetite. So the narrator went to the marketplace with his wife, and then the description of the marketplace has been given, and its household chivalry means the plump scarlet goldfish. So this is the description of the marketplace. There was a scarlet goldfish there, right? And there was a maiden hair farm, right? The fern with the very thin leaves was there, and there was uh, an angel which was made in plaster, right? So this is the description of the Victoria fountain. It was difficult to know what to choose for Npongo, and then the narrator found it very difficult to choose something which would be exciting for Npongo to eat, because he had lost all interest, because Npongo has lost all interest in food, right? He was not attracted and tempted towards any kind of food. So because of his ill health, because of his disease which he was suffering from, and so he wanted to buy something which would again make Npongo tempted towards that food item, or attracted towards that food item that would tempt his appetite, for he had such a variety of food in his normal diet. And why was it difficult? Because in his normal diet also he was given such a variety of food that it becomes very difficult to find something new for Npongo which he had not tasted. So for he had such a variety of food in his normal diet, right? His diet, his normal diet, which was given to Npongo till now, it comprised of several different varieties of food items. And so it became a challenge for the narrator and his wife to find something which would be really appealing and attractive to Npongo. Then when we were loaded down with exotic fruits and vegetables, exotic means belonging to different places, right? Belonging to foreign lands. So then when we were loaded down with exotic fruits and vegetables, I suddenly noticed on a stall that we were passing an immense green and white watermelon. So then the narrator saw a green and white watermelon, right? Watermelon is not to everyone's taste, but I personally prefer it to ordinary milk. So watermelon, then the narrator writes that watermelon is not something which everyone loves to eat, but because the narrator liked eating watermelon more than any other ordinary melon, so he was attracted, and so he thought of giving this watermelon to Npongo also. It occurred to me that the bright pink colored, scrunchy, watery interior with its glossy black seeds might be something that would appeal to Npongo. So he thought that excuse me, he thought that Npongo might also find it very appealing, right? Scrunchy means making that crunching sound noise, right? When you crush something, so that crunching sound which is made, that is scrunchy. Watery interior with its glossy black seeds might be something that would appeal to Npongo. For as far as I knew, he had never sampled it before. So as far as the narrator remembered, he has never been given watermelon. So this would be something new for Npongo, and then the bright pink color and the black seeds which form the interior of the watermelon, that might seem to be attractive to Npongo. We added the gigantic melon to our loads and drove back to the zoo. By now, through lack of food and drink, Npongo was in a very bad way. So his condition was not good. Jeremy had managed to persuade him to drink a little skimmed milk by the subterfuge of rubbing. What do you mean by subterfuge? Subterfuge means by cheating someone, or by some dishonest way, right? So by fooling Npongo, Jeremy she managed to give him some skimmed milk. And how did she fool Npongo? That has been described. Subterfuge of rubbing a Disprin on his gum. So this is how Npongo was fooled into drinking skimmed milk. What did she do? She just rubbed Disprin on the gums of Npongo, and the Disprin, of course, dissolved rapidly, and the taste not being to his liking. So some Disprin was rubbed on Npongo's teeth, and so the taste of Disprin is not good, and Disprin dissolves very quickly, all of us know. So the taste of the Disprin in his mouth was not liked by Npongo. So just to wash it out from his mouth, he drank that milk. So that is how he was subterfuged into drinking milk. The Disprin, of course, dissolved rapidly, and the taste not being to his liking, Npongo was only too happy to take a couple of gulps of milk to wash out his mouth. So because the taste of Disprin in his mouth was troubling Npongo, so he just took one or two sips of, not sips, actually gulp is a bigger amount than sip. So he took some amount of milk to wash that taste of Disprin from his mouth. One by one, we presented him with the things we had obtained in the market. And one by one, he viewed them with an apathetic glance. So one by one, all the exotic fruits, all the foreign fruits, right? Fruits from different places, right? Which were present in the market, they bought everything. So one by one, everything was kept or brought in front of Npongo so that he might be attracted to any of them. But then he gave an apathetic glance. What is the meaning of apathetic glance? Means disinterested, right? Not showing any reaction, not showing any emotion to any of the food items which were presented in front of him. He refused the hothouse grapes, the avocado pears, and other delicacies. So these are the examples of the delicacies which were bought by the narrator and his wife. So one by one, these avocados and grapes and other delicacies were presented in front of Npongo, but he looked at all of them with an apathetic glance, means without any emotion. So no excitement was noticed in Npongo's face. Then we cut him a slice of watermelon, and for the first time he displayed signs of interest. So then a slice of watermelon was cut and presented in front of Npongo, and then he showed the first signs of interest. He prodded the slice with his finger and leaned forward to smell it carefully. So he just poked the slice with his finger and then lean forward. Then he leaned forward to smell it. This is what the animals do before eating anything, right? They first use their fingers, touch anything, then they smell it, right? Look at it, right? And then they smell it, and then they consume it. If the taste and this, if the touch and the smell is to their liking, then only they will put it in their mouth, right? So he prodded the slice with his finger. So first he poked the slice with his finger and then leaned forward to smell it carefully. Then he leaned forward and smelled it. The next minute he had the slice in his hand. So he liked the smell of the watermelon, and so he just took the slice of the watermelon in his hand, and to our great delight, he started to eat. But we did not become too jubilant, for we knew that the watermelon contained practically no nutrients, but at least it had aroused his interest in food again. So there was some hope when Npongo started eating the watermelon, but then the narrator and the other people who were present there in the zoo, they were not very happy. They were not very jubilant. Why? Because the watermelon doesn't contain a lot of nutrients, right? So obviously it won't provide a lot of energy to Npongo. But at least what happened, the thing which was important was that it had aroused his interest in food again. The interest which Npongo has lost because of his illness, it was again aroused, right? After eating that watermelon. The next thing was to try to administer an antibiotic. Now, because Npongo has eaten something, so the next important thing was to give him antibiotic. As by now, the expert consensus was that he was suffering from a form of colitis. Colitis is a disease of the colon, right? Intestine, right? So it is about the swelling of the intestine, right? Which is the colon, right? So swelling in the colon, so that is colitis. Since he still refused to take any quantity of liquid in which we could mix the medicine, there was only one way to get the antibiotic into him, and that was by injection. Because he was not taking any liquids, he still refused to take liquid. So the medicine, the antibiotics couldn't be dissolved in liquid and given to him. So the only other option left with them was to inject the medicine into his body through a syringe. We enticed Npongo, right, out of his cage and kept Nandi shut up, right? So what did they do? Entice means they attracted Npongo out of his cage. Npongo was brought out of his cage and kept Nandi shut up. And Nandi was kept inside the cage. Nandi was not brought out of the cage. He would be sufficiently difficult to deal with in spite of his emaciated condition, right? So why? Because it would be very difficult to, in spite of his weak condition. Emaciated means very weakened condition. Though Npongo was weak, right? He was not in good health. But again, still in spite of his weakness, it would not be an easy task to deal with him without having any assistance from his by now extremely powerful wife. So without having any help from his wife, it would be extremely difficult to deal with him. Squatted on the floor. He squatted on the floor of the mammal house, staring about with dull sunken eyes, right? So he squatted, he sat down on the floor of the mammal house, staring about with dull sunken eyes. His eyes, they were sunken, right? There was no shine in his eyes. Jeremy squatted on one side of him, and Jeremy sat on one side of him with a supply of watermelon to try to maintain his interest. And what did Jeremy do? She was holding a plate full of watermelon so that Npongo could be interested in eating the watermelon, while I, on the other side, hastily prepared the syringe for the injection. While what the narrator did was, when Npongo was busy with the watermelon, in the meantime, they would insert the injection into his body, right? So while the narrator was preparing the syringe for the injection. Npongo watched my preparations with mild interest and once put out his hand gently to try to touch the syringe because this was something new for him, right? So once he just casually lifted his hand, right, and tried to touch the syringe. When I was ready, Jeremy endeavored to distract his attention with the pieces of melon. So once the syringe was ready, Jeremy's job was to distract him, right? Distract him from the syringe to the melon. And as soon as his head was turned away from me, I pushed the needle into his thigh and pressed the plunger home. So he was injected with the antibiotic. Npongo gave no sign of having even noticed it, but Npongo didn't react to that. So he followed us obediently back into his cage and with a small piece of watermelon retired to his shelf where he curled up on his side, his arms folded and stared at the wall. So he just went back to his cage, right? Very nicely, very quietly went back to his cage over his shelf and then curled to his sides with arm folded, and again he started staring at the wall. The following morning, he showed very slight signs of improvement. The next morning, there were some signs of improvement in his health. And using the same subterfuge, again the same deceptive, secret, dishonest means, we managed to give him another injection. Again, that plate of watermelon was brought in front of him, and then was distracted from the syringe to the watermelon. And again, he was inserted, another injection was given to him. Another shot was given to him. For the rest of the day, there seemed no change in him. And although he ate some of the melon and drank a little skimmed milk, he did not show any radical signs of progress. So though he started taking some amount of food, he drank some amount of milk also, he ate a few pieces of melon also, but then there were not radical signs of improvement. Very drastic signs of improvement were not there in his health. I was now in a quandary. Quandary means in a state of dilemma. In 24 hours, I was due to leave for France. 24 hours, he only had 24 hours in his hand. In the next 24 hours, he has to leave for France. There I had organized and stirred up B's nest of helpers and advisors. So there everything was set up. So many people, they were involved. All the arrangements were done. The hotels were booked. Everyone was in place. So everything has been planned and arranged. The BBC was also under the impression that the trip was a foregone conclusion, right? So foregone conclusion means foregone conclusion means something which is inevitable, and inevitable conclusion means the result. So foregone conclusion means anything which is an inevitable result, right? So the BBC was also under the impression that this trip is going to happen. If I put it off at this juncture, right? So they were also very sure that there is nothing which can cancel this trip now. This is supposed to happen now. So, and now if at this point of time, right, the narrator cancels the trip, then it will be a great loss, and a lot of people are involved in this entire thing, right? So they will not like it, right? It will result in a lot of loss by all these people who were a party to it. So that is why he was in a dilemma, and he didn't want to leave Npongo in such a condition and go. So if I put it off, so now at this juncture means at this point, if the narrator tries to cancel the trip, I would have put a tremendous amount of people to a lot of trouble for nothing. Then just because of him, a lot of people, so many people will be put into lot of problem for nothing. And yet I felt I could not leave Npongo unless I was satisfied that he was either on the mend or beyond salvation. And the narrator was reluctant to go, leaving Npongo in such a condition where he is not satisfied that either now he was thinking that either Npongo should recover, should be on a road to recovery, or he should be beyond salvation, right? He wanted to be sure of one thing. Either he is like beyond recovery, now he cannot be recovered, now he has to die, right? Either this thing should be final, or he should start his journey towards recovery. So this was his dilemma, right? It said, now I was in a quandary. So this was his dilemma, right? That there are so many people, so much money has been invested, everything has been planned, and so many people have been involved. The BBC people are also, they are very sure of this trip, that this will definitely take place, and everything has been arranged. On one side, all these things were happening, and on the other side, Nkongo's condition, right? He was not showing any radical signs of improvement. And then there was something which also prompted the narrator that he's not going to die. So he wanted to be sure of one thing at least, that either he should mend or be beyond salvation. Means now he cannot recover. So one of these things should happen. He wanted to be sure of one of these things. See, when a person or anyone is in such a stage that he cannot recover, right? The only option is death. Then somehow mentally you are satisfied that you did your best. Now you cannot, now the person or the creature cannot recuperate. No matter what you do, the person or the creature will not survive. But here both things were possible, right? So that is why the narrator was in a quandary. Then the day before I was due to leave, he suddenly turned the corner. Then what happened? The day when the narrator was supposed to leave for France, what happened? He suddenly turned the corner. Turning the corner means to improve after a very difficult time. When something suffers or goes through a very difficult phase, and after that the situation starts improving or recovering, then it is known as turning the corner. I was due to leave, he suddenly turned the corner. Then all of a sudden, after such a difficult phase, he started recuperating. He started drinking his Complan, a highly concentrated form of dried milk. You know what is the Complan? So he again started drinking his Complan and eating a variety of foods. The day the narrator was supposed to leave, he started eating and drinking. By the evening of that day, he showed considerable signs of improvement and had eaten quite a bit of food. So by the evening of that day, he showed considerable signs of improvement and had taken some amount of food, good amount of food. The next morning, I went down very early to look at him, for I was due to catch my plane to Dinard at 8:30. So early in the morning, the day the narrator was supposed to leave, he went to have a look at Nkongo. Why? Because his plane was due from Dinard at 8:30 in the morning. He was sitting up on the shelf, and although he still looked emaciated means weak, right? He looked emaciated, he looked weak, and unwell his eyes had a sparkle that had been lacking for the past few days. Still, there was a gleam, there was a shine, there was a sparkle in the eyes of Nkongo, which was missing from the past few days. That shine was there in his eyes. Though he still was weak, obviously he will take some time to recover, right? But still that shine was back. He ate quite well and drank his Complan, and I felt that he was at last on the road to recovery. So now the narrator was sure that his health will improve and he will recover, right? They are not going to lose Nkongo. I drove down to the airport and caught the plane to Dinard, and we motored down to the south of France, right? So then he went to France. It cost a small fortune in long distance calls to Jersey to keep myself appraised of Nkongo's progress. So again, they were not very rich people, and it cost, it was very expensive in those days, making long distance call from France to Jersey. But still, because the narrator was concerned about the health of Nkongo, so he still made long distance calls to the people at zoo to be informed about Nkongo's progress, right? How Nkongo was improving, to know about Nkongo's condition. But every time I telephoned, the reports got better. So every time the narrator called at the zoo, he was informed that Nkongo was improving. And when Jeremy informed me that Nkongo had drunk one pint of Complan and eaten 3 slices of watermelon, 2 bananas, 1 apricot, 3 apples, and whites of 8 eggs, I knew there was no further cause for alarm. So now, because Npongo was back, right, he was eating like he used to in the past. So then the narrator thought that now there is no further cause for alarm. Now Npongo is in good health. So now he was relaxed. By the time I returned from France, Npongo had put on all the weight he had lost. So when he came back from France, Npongo had put on all the weight. He was back in his old form. And when I went into the mammal house, there he was to greet me, his old self, massive, black, and roaching. So that same large, plump, huge structure, black colored, his eyes glittering mischievously as he tried to inveigle me close enough to the wire so that he could pull the buttons of my coat. Right? So as he tried to inveigle means to take control over somebody, right? And by acting smart, by in a very clever and a smart manner, if you try to take control over somebody, so that is inveigle, right? So he tried to smartly pull the buttons of the coat of the narrator. I reflected as I watched him rolling on his back and clapping his hands in an effort to attract my attention. So this is how the animals and even the small children, they attract the attention, right? They start doing strange things. So Npongo, to attract the attention of the narrator, he started clapping and rolling on his back. That though it was delightful to have creatures like this, and of vital importance that they should be kept and bred in captivity. So in the end, the narrator says that it is delightful, right? Keeping such creatures in the zoo makes you happy, right? It is a pleasant thing to have such creatures like this, like Npongo and Nandi in the zoo. And it is of vital importance that they should be bred in captivity, because this is something which has been stressed upon by the narrator at the beginning of the story also, right? That we need to keep these creatures in the zoo, and there is an urgent need to breed the creatures which are breeding of the species which are almost becoming extinct or on the verge of extinction. They should be kept in the zoo and they should be bred in captivity so that their numbers increase. It was a two-edged sword. Now, why was it a two-edged sword? For the anxiety you suffered when they become ill, made you wonder why you started the whole thing in the first place. So why is it a two-edged sword? Keeping these animals in the zoo and breeding them in captivity, it is delightful, no doubts about it. It is a good thing to do, makes you happy, it makes you feel good, but it is a two-edged sword. Why? Because the anxiety, the pain, the suffering which you undergo when they fall ill, like and Npongo fell ill, and all the stress and the tension through which the narrator had gone through when Npongo was not well, right? Then you start wondering, why did you start this entire thing in the first place, right? Why did you begin all these things, right? This makes you feel very negative about the whole idea of breeding these animals, breeding the endangered species in captivity, right? So that is why it is a two-edged sword. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of this chapter. Thank you.